Okay, so as you can see, we have already unpacked the LWTS. We have these larger pipes here. They're going to be a part of the backwash assembly. Those are typically strapped to the side of the cage by themselves. Additionally, we have some of these smaller pieces here in the middle. These are oftentimes contained in a cardboard box contained inside the cage. In addition to that, there'll be the tools and the alum bracket assembly. All right, first step, before you place the backwash tank on top of the LWTS, is you're going to want to install the air release valves. That's these large brass, they say watts on top. Be sure to tape the threads, which we have already done, and thread that into the top of F1 and F2. Just thread these on by hand, like this. All right, this is the top of the backwash tank, and there's only 3 main pieces that you need for this assembly. That's going to be the lid and 2 of these elbow assemblies. This elbow assembly with the screen is the vent for the tank. The purpose of the vent is to prevent any pressure from building up in the tank or creating any vacuum in the tank as it is filling and draining. If this vent is not in there and this hole is blocked, there is the potential to collapse this tank. So for the vent, when you assemble this, there's no need to tape this thread. And you'll see later on that in order to get this in, we really just pop it in. We don't actually have a chance to thread it in due to space limitations. This elbow assembly does require tape, as this is going to be how the water comes out of the LWTS below and enters into the backwash assembly. So as you build this, please tape all the appropriate threads. The first piece that you're going to place on this lid is going to be the filling elbow, not the vent. So the filling elbow goes in the center of the lid and screws on like so. Now you want to be sure to stop the elbow not in a position like this where it's sticking over top of the vent hole. You want to give it a little bit more rotation so that it's facing away from there. Next, you're going to want to take the air vent and you're going to want to place the lid on a hard surface and take the air vent, get it lined up, walk it in as best you can, and then give it a good hit. And work it in. It doesn't have to extrude very far. At a minimum, you should have 1 to 2 centimeters protruding through the lid. Next, you can take the entire lid assembly, place it on top of the backwash tank, and screw it down. And finally, take your hose clamp, and you can place it on the hose barb for when you're ready to connect the output of the LWTS to the top of the backwash tank. Before you place the backwash tank on top of the LWTS, be sure to reinstall these horizontal structural bars on the top of the LWTS. It helps make it be structurally sound for the weight of the backwash water on top. Have a friend help you lift it up. And place it here. You're going to want to have this rotated such that this drain valve is lined up with the backwash assembly. Next, you're going to want to secure hose clamps to bind the backwash tank with the LWTS like this. Next, you're going to want to take the backwash feed hose that's hanging off the top and place it onto the top elbow of your product water discharge. Put your hose clamp on and work it on, tightening the hose clamp as you go. Next, we're going to start building the backwash manifold assembly. You're going to want to open up the valve on the backwash tank. If it's a new tank, you're going to have a seal around here. You're going to want to make sure you peel that seal off. First, you're going to take this piece and you are going to thread this onto here. You're going to tape it as normal because this is a watertight assembly here. And you're going to place it on, and you're going to be very careful not to cross thread. You're going to assemble this on like so. As you're rotating this on, and in general as you're assembling, be very careful of these O-rings. We have them taped in place, but sometimes they still want to fall out. So please be careful with those O-rings. Next, you're going to want to connect the backwash assembly to the backwash drain valve. As you do this, you're going to be connecting this piece to this using this sub-assembly. First, remove the tape from the pieces that contain O-rings. Ensure that the O-ring is in place there and it's not missing. You'll also find an O-ring here. When there's tape, remove that first. You're going to want to thread this collar in, but don't tighten it down all the way yet. Leave it a little bit loose so you've got some play as you get this lower assembly into place. Sometimes the hoses will get in your way. Just move them out of the way a little bit so you can get the collar on. Once you get things lined up, you can start to tighten down the collars. And it's advisable that you do it incrementally to ensure that each of them get a good seal on to their pipes. Next, you're going to want to take this assembly with the large hose clamp, and you'll need a partner to help you with this step. First, remove the tape from this piece and ensure that the O-ring is still in place. Next, you're going to want to hand a partner those tools where they're going to make it so you can open it up, because that is going to support this from the top. Be sure to place these spacers between the pipes and the cage, and then zip tie this assembly together to give it structural support. Once you get the backwash assembly in place, it tends to be a problem area for leaks. Sometimes you'll see that your unions, you can see that it's not seated in there parallel to each other. It's a little bit off at an angle that prevents a good seal. Sometimes it just needs to be tightened down more. Sometimes you need to jiggle the alignment of everything. So ensure the collars are nice and tight. Sometimes this flex joint will give you problems. You might have to adjust its position up here, tighten it down. It'll take a little bit of trial and error to get the leaks out, but you will be able to get it all aligned. Be sure that this valve gets opened before the LWTS is put into use. So this is the inlet of the LWTS. So take the hose that's coming from your source, feed it in, and connect. Next, you're going to want to connect the product hose. So this is going to be coming from your tank to the product discharge of the LWTS. Also, we want to connect, this is the overflow. If you overfill the backwash tank, it will come out here. So it's good to connect your drain hose so that you can direct that water to where you want it to go. You want to take all of these drain hoses and pull them out of the LWTS. These are where your backwash water is going to come out of, and you don't want to be making a mess with it. There will be 3 hoses in total. you're going to want to place the handles into their appropriate valves. Sometimes these handles are in the brown box inside the cage. There have been times when these handles are inside of the cap of the chlorinator. So if you can't find these, look inside of the chlorinator dome. You can see the numbers of the valves are written on each one. So you can take valve 1, place it on there. Take valve 2, that's your chlorine control valve. Valve 3, that's your flow diversion valve. Find the alignment and slide it on. For assembling the alum tank, you're going to have 2 chains, 4 S-hooks, 2 hose clamps, the shelf, the jug, and the hose. First, you're going to want to take the hose clamps and the shelf and place it at a suitable level and use the hose clamps in order to create a hinge. Next, you're going to want to place the S-hooks onto the shelf so that you can take your chains with the S-hook on top of that. You're going to want to slip it over, connect it to itself, and then you can raise the shelf to approximately level and hook it in. Next, you're going to place the hose inside of the jug, screw the lid on, place the jug inside of the assembly, connecting the hose to the venturi. There is no need for a hose clamp on this connection. So that is the assembly of the LWTS. Thanks for watching. Next, we're going to be going into the basic operation. All right, next I'd like to walk through the basic operation of the system. But first, I want to go through the main components. From the left to the right, we have the alum venturi with bypass valve. You have the alum meter, it's the flow meter with control valve. You have the flow control valve for the entire system. You have the chlorine control valve. You have the product water control valve. You have the backwash handle. And you have the chlorine drain. On the right side here, you have the backwash tank drain valve and 2 valves which each individually can stop the backwash on an individual filter. So the water first comes in here, which is the alum venturi assembly. There's 2 main components of this. It is the venturi itself. The water flows through here. There's a constriction in it, that's what a venturi is, which causes the water to flow at a very high velocity. That causes a negative pressure that will suck in the alum out of the hose. You can control how much vacuum or suction is produced based on how much water we force to come through the venturi. So the more that this valve is open, it allows water to pass primarily through the bypass, the less suction we're going to be producing on the venturi. The more we close this, the more water that passes through the venturi, creating a greater vacuum, which will draw in more alum. This is the alum flow control meter, and this is the alum flow control valve. You see there's a little black ball in here that will bounce around, and typically a good starting point is going to be 30 cc's per minute. So you're going to first slowly close the venturi bypass valve until the black ball on the alum venturi flow meter starts to come up, and it's probably just going to spike up to 100. From that point, you're going to take the alum control valve and slowly close it just a little bit until the ball drops back down to somewhere between 20 and 40. 30 is a good place to start. This is the flow control valve for the system. This valve allows you to throttle the flow coming in. Typically, you just want this to be set all the way open for full flow. Occasionally, if for whatever reason the pump that you're using is oversized, you might have to throttle this down such that your total flow in the system is approximately 10 gallons per minute. You note right above this valve is the pressure relief valve. If the pump were operating at full power and you close this all the way, or there's a problem in the system and pressure builds up to an extent that it may be damaging to the system, this valve will pop open and water will be spraying out that way. So if this pops up, it will look like that. Water will be spraying out. In order to reset this, you're going to want to first turn off the pump. Once the water has stopped flowing, you're going to want to look at your system to see what was the cause of the malfunction. Make sure that flow is able to pass through the flow control valve or anywhere else on the system that might be the problem. Next, you're going to want to lift the wing nut and then take your hand and reset the pressure relief valve by pushing down firmly. You should hear a nice clip. You can then lower the wing nut back down, but do not tighten the wing nut. We have the chlorine control valve. This valve is different than our standalone chlorinator. This valve is a three-way valve, and the only way to control the amount of chlorine is with this single valve. When it is pointing up, you are getting maximum chlorine dosage. As you rotate it clockwise, you are getting less chlorine dosage. At the end of the day, when you want to drain the chlorinator, that same valve, you rotate around until it is pointing to drain, and make sure that your chlorinator drain is open. The product flow control valve. This valve determines whether the product water is sent to the backwash tank or if it is sent to the product tank. This valve, when you start in the morning, we should first have it aimed up, and this will deliver the product water to our backwash tank. You always want to first fill your backwash tank because you don't want to block up your filters and accidentally not have backwash water in order to clean your filters. After your backwash tank is full, you can divert this water to your holding tank where you allow it to be publicly available to your community. This is the chlorinator and dome housing. To open it and place in chlorine tablets, unscrew the clamp. You don't need to unscrew the clamp all the way, because once it's loose, you can rotate the bolt out so that the clamp can slide off. Now the dome can be lifted up. Place the chlorine in there like so. Sometimes it's required to place a little bit of Vaseline around the O-ring here to ensure a proper seal. When you are reassembling the chlorinator dome, ensure that your surfaces are clean of any debris and dirt. First, place the dome back on to the housing, making sure that it is seated securely. Next, place in the dome clamp around the lip of the chlorinator and housing, and then close the bolt over the clamp and rotate the nut securely. Do not use tools on this nut, and you should rotate it until the jaws are closed on the clamp. For the backwashing of the LWTS, the first step is to stop the flow of the water by turning off the pump. Once the water has stopped moving, you can first ensure that the backwash tank drain valve is open. There's never really any need to close this valve, so once you open it for the first time, you can leave it open for the rest of the time. The first time you backwash, you're going to want to ensure that these two valves are open and that the backwash drain valve is closed. Now, to begin the backwash process, simply grab the backwash handle and open fully by pulling it towards you sharply. This will allow water that is stored in the backwash tank above to begin to flow down through this assembly, and it will be diverted through the filters, reversing the flow and removing the debris that has been accumulating during normal operation. It is necessary to monitor the backwash in your discharge lines. You should see water flowing out of 2 of your hoses. Each of those hoses are connected to one of your filters. The water will be very dirty as it comes out. Many times when you begin the backwash, you'll find that backwash flow is only coming out of one of your 2 backwash drain hoses. If that is the case, give it a little bit of time to see if it'll begin. It's useful if you identify which of these 2 hoses is connected to which tank and which valve. To do that, you're going to have to trace it with your hand to the different assemblies and look at the actual plumbing to figure it out. But let's say this hose is the one that is not flowing. Sometimes we just need to draw a little suction on it. So we're going to take the guzzler that's provided with the LWTS. We've mounted it on a board. It makes it a little easier to use. And you're going to hook the hose up to the inlet of the guzzler. And then we can take the guzzler and pump it. We don't actually have any water, so we're not going to get anything. But pump it till water is coming out solid, and then it should start to flow naturally by itself. And you can allow it to backwash now, having flow come out of each hose. Secondly, sometimes you'll get a backwash rate that is too high of a velocity, and you can wash out some of your filter media from your tanks. So it's good to look at your backwash water as it's coming out. Take your hand, place it, have the water flow onto it. And if you see the anthracite and garnet that's contained in these tanks, it's in orange color, it's pretty solid and dense. If you see those materials, you'll know it when you see it. Find which of these valves is associated with that drain hose and throttle it slightly. Just a little bit to slow down the velocity of the water such that the filter media is no longer being passed through the backwash. When you're dealing with heavily turbid water, this venturi tends to back up sometimes. In order to do that, you need to disassemble it and clean it. First, remove the venturi hose. Then you're going to want to grab onto this nut and unscrew it. Now you have to be very careful with this because there are small pieces in here. There are 3 pieces to be aware of. There is a rubber grommet or a gasket. There is a small ball, and there is a spring. It is very easy to lose these. So you're going to open this very close, carefully, keeping pressure pressure up onto the system so nothing comes flying out. Then you're going to look at this. First, make sure there's nothing in this piece. There shouldn't be. Set this in a clean place. Then you're going to very carefully pull out the seal. Now this is the step that you have to be very careful with, because this is holding in a spring and a small valve. Use your fingernail or a nice clean edge to work out this seal. Now as you peel it away, you're going to want to place your thumb underneath it so you can catch any pieces that are going to come out. See, the ball and the spring have come out with it. In order to clean this, you're going to want to take something and clean out in there. You can take water, jet the water into there, allow the water to flow normally and let the water jet out of there. Take a clean cloth, clean the seal, clean this ball, clean this spring. Do everything you can to remove debris from this assembly. For reassembly, remember that the spring goes on top, followed by the ball, and the seal last. It's important that as you're placing this spring in here, that it goes in straight and right up the middle. It's easy for it to get out of alignment in there, so be very gentle placing it up there. Place the ball in after it. Lastly, take your freshly cleaned seal and place it in there, packing it back in gently. So this concludes the assembly, the operation, and some of the basic troubleshooting for the LWTS. Your LWTS may be a slightly different version, but the procedures and how you're going to go about the operation is going to be fundamentally the same. So thanks for watching, and feel free to reach out to us with any questions.